Well, good morning, everybody. We start today with day 10 of forecasting this system that's rolling through the midsection of the country. And this morning on the all hazards weather map here, about 5:40 this morning, we do have widespread freeze warnings that are out. We have winter storm watches and warnings right in through this area, really winter storm warnings in through here. And then on ahead of it, this is all related to wind. And this has been a pretty powerful system. We've been concerned about the wind and widespread wind damage this late in the season for some of our crops. Elsewhere around the country, a couple of things to point out. We do have frost advisories that are out for parts of Pennsylvania, and then pretty dense fog this morning in parts of North Carolina. But it's the wind around this system that's going to get a lot of attention. And as we just kind of watch this system evolve today, we're going to watch for 40 to 50 mile an hour wind gusts on the backside of this low as it continues to ride along the warm front off to the eastern Great Lakes and eventually over to the mid-Atlantic by the time we get into this weekend. Now, our story kind of remains the same. We still have systems stacked up in the Pacific Northwest. We're going to watch the pattern evolve to see what we think the next couple of weeks are going to look like across the United States. And it's going to be primarily driven, I think, right now by what's going on in the Pacific. But I've got a whole lot of new long-range information for you. So kind of sit back and relax. We're going to walk through quite a bit of this today. Okay, I did want to bring up the latest I've got on maximum accumulated wind gusts through Sunday afternoon. So this is the whole system as it moves across. So again, we're watching today for those very strong winds to be coming through parts of Nebraska. In fact, just a large part of the Central Plains and then through the upper Midwest, where there's going to be some very heavy rain continuing to push through this particular area. If we look back at the last 72 hours of total accumulated precipitation, we can now kind of see the big events we watched this week. The tropical impulse through here, so widespread rain throughout parts of Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina that got up above 2 inches. Some areas in through here 2 to 4 inches of rainfall. Down into Florida, a lot of severe weather. I'm sure you saw some of the news reports of the tornado damage that was down in parts of Florida. But if you come back to the central United States system, which after it brought in all the heavy rain to coastal parts of Washington and Oregon, is now spinning its way through the midsection of the country, and it's delivered already some extremely heavy rainfall into this corridor and some snow on the backside. I'll show you that in just a few seconds. Now, as we look at where this is hitting a region that is still very much in drought. Okay, so the newest drought monitor, remember the data for this was on Tuesday. It was released to us yesterday morning. We did see some expansion of the overall drought in the United States, a lot of that down here in parts of the south and southeast. But this is going to be delivering a lot of rainfall to some extremely dry areas. And there's good and there's bad with this. We need the rain. I mean, there's no doubt in that we need the rain in these regions in through here. But what I want to stress here is that this time of year getting such heavy rain right before harvest, given that this is a time of year when the crop is at its weakest structurally, after reaching maturity, we have just the risk of this causing problems with harvest. As you look farther to the south, extremely dry down here, although remember, the rains that just came through Louisiana, especially southern Louisiana down here, were not included in this. But that's a large area, such a large percentage of Louisiana currently in exceptional drought. And you can see this corner of southeast Kansas, parts of Nebraska and Iowa, right here in eastern Iowa, just showing up exceptionally dry. And that's not to ignore other places around the country, but we're just trying to get an eye on this. If you look back from the 12th of September to the 12th of October, where we saw our driest conditions were in a few places. We're just going to try to identify with a few big ovals here outside of the southwestern United States. And so this is where we saw our drought expand, okay, into this area and parts of the eastern Corn Belt and eastern Great Lakes. We've seen it persist in parts of Missouri and parts of Kansas overall. But again, that's your last month worth of precip stats. Remember, when you get into these shades, we're on the wetter side of the historical average. But I continue to focus on what's going on with our major central United States river systems, specifically the Mississippi from southern Illinois down to New Orleans. We've been watching what's going on in Memphis, and just want to point out that the river is now record low at Memphis. We're still at about 11.2 to 11.5 feet below low stage, and that is lower than a year ago at this point, just to continue to make that point. We're going to come back to this again in the end. But I do want to show you, this is our newest root zone soil moisture map when we go down to about 40 inches. So this is a big root zone soil, or deep root zone soil map. And I would like to show you where things have been changing. So if you go back a month ago, that's what our map looked like. And this is what it looks like now. So this was the 13th of September. This is the 13th of October. So where the heavier rains have been coming through, we have seen this map change quite a bit, but there's been other regions that just continue to get into these deeper shades of red, and that's going to have to continue to be watched as we go forward in this forecast. I mentioned snow. This was through midnight, so we're looking at the last 6 hours of accumulation. So there has been a little bit more in this area, but I think the models did a pretty good job at picking up on that area. For last night, for having some snowfall, we knew that the chances of getting heavy snow in this area were dwindling, but there was a couple of pockets in parts of Nebraska that did pick up some heavier snow. And this morning I was looking at the observations. This is the surface observations. We can very easily find the center of the low. It's right in through this area. The G, remember, represents wind gusts at the time this was taken. So we've seen wind gusts, in the 30s, a couple of them up here in the 40s, 45, 43. I mean, these are some strong winds on the backside of this, definitely warranting the high wind warnings. I mean, there's a gust of 44 there with sustained at 30. By the way, these are in knots, nautical miles per hour. So this you'd have to 1.15. You'd have to multiply that number to get the miles per hour. So we've got some very strong winds. But I was looking for any leftover snow on the back side of this, and overall, I'm not seeing any. I'm looking for double asterisks. That's what we'd be looking for here. So this system continues to curl itself up, and behind it, quite a bit of colder air on the back side. Now remember, we expected these temperatures to fall off 30 to 40 degrees over a couple of day time periods. So just comparing to yesterday, we're already 20 degrees cooler than we were yesterday at this time, and there's quite a bit more cold air wrapping itself behind this low. Last night, we did see some very strong storms yesterday afternoon right here in this part of Nebraska. Multiple tornado reports, plus we saw hail coming out of this right there. But overall, the system continues to wind itself up and press off to the east, and it's going to continue to cause issues all the way through today, tomorrow, and as we get into the weekend, moving over here through Pennsylvania and eventually exiting almost through New Jersey. Today's severe weather risk has been minimalized. It's been reduced, I guess I should say. We just got an area through here that we're going to watch for some strong to severe storms. And this is what it looks like on our high-res models. So I'm going to show you the precip type and intensity here playing through this morning. We're going to watch the main upper-level front sweep from parts of like Minneapolis through kind of the Quad Cities area down towards Springfield, Illinois, exit St. Louis, and then follow its way back all the way down here to almost Dallas. That's where the main upper-level front will be. Broad shield of rain out ahead of it. Wrap around on the back side. Tight spacing of isobars resulting in some rain. There's your surface cold front right there. Okay, so that's through this afternoon, getting into this evening. So we're going to watch in between. See how the models are trying to kick off a round of convection in between? This is where we're going to keep an eye out for the risk of those stronger storms. And then the main front kicks through by this evening, really tonight. And then you get some wraparound showers on the back side of this as the heavier rain moves toward the Appalachian Mountains and moves here into parts of Pennsylvania, New York, and the eastern Great Lakes. So this is now Saturday morning, playing through midday Saturday, hitting the mid-Atlantic with heavy rains. This is getting into Saturday evening. And you're going to watch that system finally exit by overnight hours Saturday, getting into early Sunday morning. So on the back side, colder, windier, isolated showers coming through here. And then we're going to watch at the very tail end of this up here, and the next system kind of come into the Pacific Northwest. So I'm going to take you back there. We'll finish it up there, 7 a.m. on Sunday morning with one system exiting, high pressure building in behind this, but some scattered showers still possible. Okay, total rainfall from the WPC. So this is what's left of this system. Questions are down here. Now, we've talked about the systems coming into the northwest, but we need to be thinking about what could be happening in the southern plains, parts of Oklahoma, Texas, getting over to Arkansas and Louisiana. And there's a potential system next week that we want to be kind of watching very carefully. That's best seen by going to the upper levels. So let's just go ahead and have a look at this trough ridge pattern. So there's the exiting low right there. That's by Sunday. There's our big blocking high we've talked a lot about. And we're going to watch it fade and a shortwave move in early next week into the Pacific Northwest. Now, while all of that happens, our flow just seems to want to stay like this. So that's going to keep colder air here, drier air in the central United States. But we have to watch for any wave to come through the northwest and make its way over the mountains, like this guy right here. Now, by next week, what we're watching is this potential event happening. There could be a secondary shortwave that sneaks down here, while the main wave ejects somewhere maybe in the southern Canadian prairie or into the Dakotas. And the models are trying to pull both of these together about a week from now, next Friday, and drive more cold air down into the southern and southeastern part of the United States. So we're going to see more mild weather here, but this originates farther to the north, meaning that this is not going to be the wet kind of system. The wet ones come in like this. Whoops, sorry about that. They come in like this. The drier ones come in like that, right? I think that makes intuitive sense there. But as we get out here farther, this is now the 22nd, 23rd. There's our kind of high over low setup we talked about, and there's the overall flow through the country. So that keeps cooler here. I'll put a D over it, drier in through there, and warmer conditions in the west, and that seems to be the mainstay of the pattern. All right, so what's it doing when we compare the GFS to the European? I apologize. Some of you who watch my website noticed that yesterday's 12Z and then the day before, we've had some data delivery problems from the ECMWF, and the model maps have been wacky. Everything's back into place now as we get into Friday morning here. So as we play them together, we watch the one system exit. High pressure dominates for a couple of days here. And then we're going to see the next low coming in next Monday, Tuesday into the Pacific Northwest. And that's really only getting rain into Washington and Oregon, maybe a little bit into Northern California. Now, this is the trough that could send kind of two pieces, one north and one south. The GFS is doing a whole lot more to resolve this southern system. Now watch, keep your eye on the GFS. This is next Wednesday. You see it attempts to kick off a much deeper low down here. And the European waits on it. It takes the northern wave through, see all this? And it waits to develop the southern wave until much later in the time period. So this is Thursday into Friday. So it's over the lower Mississippi River Valley where it develops that low a week from now. And the GFS is developing it here over the southern plains. Now I'm going to watch model trends all weekend. We're going to look at the ensembles for this in a moment. But that's going to be the next kind of system in our, what I continue to call week on, week off pattern, right? We get about one of these a week coming through the west, getting into the Midwest, and then finally making its way, in this case, I think over toward the southeast. So that's hitting some dry area, right? So this would be a critical system a week from now to be watching. All right, we can add it all up. Let's look at the individual model runs. This is the European 0Z run. Now remember, this included some of the rain from last night because this is the 0Z run. We don't get the 12Z till later today. As we play through, we're going to try to capture that next system. Now that goes out a week. So do you see here that 1 week from now, this goes all the way up to next Thursday evening. Okay, that's when the 0Z run starts. It's wetter in the European north and doesn't develop the southern system. The GFS does. And 1 week from now on the GFS, it's got a much bigger system to the south and weaker one to the north. So that's our main model difference a week from now when you compare the two. And it shows up nicely when you look at the comparison between the ECMWF and the GFS. So notice how wetter the ECMWF is here and how wetter the European, the GFS is down here. So I'm just kind of bringing that point together there. We can also look at this in terms of probabilities, and this is what the smarter way to do this is. This is the chance over the next 10 days of getting an inch. And all of this is really coming from right now. But the increased probabilities in the southeast is from the second system next week. Okay? This is all system 1. This is coming in from the system 2. Notice the European model is not aggressive on bringing in really wet conditions down into the southern plains. And interestingly enough, the GFS ensemble for the probability of an inch is also not as aggressive. So we have big questions about this system next week into where it's going to be. The operational runs are tossing it out in the European model, in the GFS, it's there, but it's not there necessarily in the ensemble. Real quick, just to show you the drier areas, this is where we expect drier conditions over the next 10 days compared to climatological average. And that's a big section of the country. And remember, this area in through here is just the system now. So we do see drier conditions overall sliding into week 2. And that's why we've seen the transition in the CPC, the European model, and the GFS looking drier. The one place they all agree that could be wetter would be down here in the southeast. And remember, that is the system next week that we're watching. That's going to come with that short wave and sneak into the southeast. So we'll keep a close eye on that to see if we can continue to kind of work back the drought issues that are developing in parts of the southeast to the mid-Atlantic. That's week 2. All right, let's flip this over to a discussion on temperatures. Frost risk over the next 7 days is shown here. A lot of this is just the cold air coming in behind this system, and you can see that pretty well on today's highs. So our low is wrapping itself up here. It's almost trying to occlude. There's one front to the south. There's the warm front off to the east, and a lot of colder air. I mean, we're now talking about temperatures today in the 40s and 50s. After in Kansas earlier this week, we were in the upper 80s, low 90s. So already seen a big drop in temperatures. There's Saturday getting into Sunday. That's when the cold air really pulls in behind this and gets all the way down to the Gulf Coast compared to normal. That's pretty cool. And then you see warmth in the west. This is when we get our pattern like this. So that's Monday into Tuesday. There is a coastal system next Monday into Tuesday coming in here. We're going to watch a brief rebound of temperatures across the mid part of the country. But remember, by next Thursday, we're watching that second system. Does it form here? Does it form there? We still have yet to see. But it does seem to want to get into the southeast, keeping things cooler. And that seems to be the mainstay of the pattern. Here's your 5-day temperature anomaly from the European model. We're going to slide this out to day 5 through 10. So notice where we've maintained our cooler bias, day 5 through 10. And day 10 through 15, we tend to see some more mild conditions as we work our way toward the third and fourth weeks of October overall in the models. And you can thank that to the blocking pattern. Remember that we drew over the big high over low? That's just sending the jet stream like this, opening up to more mild conditions overall. All right, that's your 2 weeks from the latest updates we've got from both the operational and the ensemble models. What I want to do now is kind of make a case for some international weather issues and talk a bit about what's going on in the longer range. So I mentioned how low the Mississippi River is and what this is doing to affect traffic on the Mississippi River. We need to add that. I was talking to some good friends of mine yesterday about bigger issues globally. We need to add that to the ongoing problems we're having down in the Panama Canal. We talked about this a month ago. Nothing's been resolved here. The last 2 months, the drought throughout Mexico, Central America, and down here toward Panama just continues to expand in a big way. And the problems are that, in fact, I think Susan Stroud is down there right now looking and assessing the situation. The problem here is that this is really disrupting, Western Hemisphere ocean traffic. And we need to just continue to keep a very close eye on this as we progress forward in the forecast. Now, I want you to remember something. If you look down here in Panama, right now, October is supposed to be their wettest month. Okay, so if there's going to be drought recovery, it has to be now. And my friend Arlen Suderman mentioned this to me yesterday. He said, if we don't come in with wet conditions in October or November, remember, their dry season starts in December and goes all the way to April. So if we do not see this recover now, this is going to be an issue all the way through middle of next year until we get back into the rainy season again. Now remember, this year's rainy season was non-existent. It was very, very dry. And that's why we're getting some problems. So I need you to be watching the Panama Canal. The next 10 days, I'm going to blow this up so we can kind of see it here. You do notice near normal, maybe slightly wetter than normal conditions. But we need to have like 15 inches of rain for the rest of October for this to go any direction other than where it's heading. And we're just not seeing it right now. You also notice on this map what's going on in South America. We've seen an expansion of the drier conditions into big sections of Brazil. So we watched all week long the models trend drier and drier here while they've gotten wetter and wetter farther to the south. And before I come back to that, though, because I'm coming back to South America, I want to just give you an update on the tropics, too, because the tropics are beginning to shift around a bit. We have Sean, but we have something following Sean. And the models are getting kind of, just interesting with it. Here's the low over the next 10 days. That's some pretty tight clustering. And there's just some suggestion that something that builds in here very late in the season, very uncharacteristic, may make its way over to the Lesser Antilles, which means next week we need to be seeing if this is still a potential system that has the ability, despite where the Bermuda High is, to maybe be something to be talking about for the United States. Big question marks on this, but that's pretty tight clustering overall of where this tropical system is going to be. So I just wanted to toss that in between coming back and telling you more about South America. So this is the newest 0Z run on 10-day outlook for precipitation. And if you kind of take a look at these colors and match them up over here on my color bar, we're missing out on about a full inch of precipitation in the next 10 days. And this is going to be a problem. Crop that's been planted in Mato Grosso do Sul, Goiás, Tocantins, this area, this is the wrong kind of trend for good germination. which means if we don't see a major shift in this over the next week with better rains coming back into this area, then there's probably going to be some replant going on here. Now, I still expect when we get the new planting numbers out from Mato Grosso later today that they're still going to be at or above the 5-year average. But it's also a matter of how much more gets planted, because remember, 80 to 90% of the soybean crop should be planted by the end of October. We're almost halfway through it, and we're about, what are we going to be at? 15 to 20, I don't know, somewhere in that range. I'll put those numbers out in my report on Monday. More flooding down in parts of Parna, Santa Catarina, down on the Parna River, but we're still drier in key areas in Argentina overall. And I looked at the Parna River yesterday, which runs right in through here. It's outside of its average depth. It's lower than average, and that's going to continue to be an issue, going forward with the next several months. Okay, I did want to point out that as we get into next week, we are expecting above average temperatures here, running 3 to 7 degrees Celsius above normal. But it is still spring. If I showed this and it was much later in the year, this would be extremely problematic, but we want to watch out for that above average temperature. All right, I've been thinking about this a lot because all week long, you've noticed my videos, I've avoided giving you long-range forecasts other than what I did on Monday. And the reason for that is I'm getting some pretty strong mixed signals from the atmosphere. I've made a case that I think what's going on in the MJO is the most dominant signal. And what I'm talking about here is the fact that for the next 15 days and possibly for the next month, we have sinking motion over phase 4, 5, rising motion over Africa, rising motion over phase 8, and some rising motion just off of this side of South America. And when I see these diagrams straight up and down, what it tells me is the trade winds are locked in their position over the Indian Ocean. And they're probably locked into where they're going to be over the Pacific. And if the MJO stays there, and that's our most dominant teleconnection, then I have to just ask what that means overall for the longer range forecast. But I want to add something to this as we kind of complete this story. The Atlantic meridional mode. Okay, we have one in the Pacific, we have one in the Atlantic. It is out here way positive. Look how far out it's sitting here on the distribution for September and for all months. It's way out here and it continues to be out here. And I think this is really affecting South American weather. Now let me make a point. When you look at the AAM in October, November, and correlate it with precipitation rate, these blue colors, listen carefully, are drier. The warm colors, positive correlation, would be wetter. So we have a positive AAM, which is wetter here, and it sneaks into southern Brazil. See that? The problem, as I've been pointing out for weeks, is that the flow is still coming from this direction, right? Remember that? And that's where it's been drier. You see, that's why this region has been struggling to bring in good moisture so far this year, and that's where we're continuing to be drier. Also, take a look, drier in Argentina with this. You see, it's all fitting together, the AAM having a major influence on this. But just thinking about where this might go, well, if El Nino and the MJO keep the suppression over phase 4-5, that's Indonesia and Australia, we would expect, as we get through the month of November, better rains to come into this area while we continue to see risks of dryness here as the AAM still has its influence. You see how we have competing teleconnections? And that is why I have no confidence. I just don't have any confidence in my long-range forecasting right now. I see too many things. They either work together or they work against each other. Some are constructive, some are deconstructive. I think we can agree on this. And that's all the wet weather that we're expecting in southern Brazil. That's going to be a problem. I think this cannot be ignored, nor can the drought in Argentina be ignored in favor of thinking about the planting progress in Brazil. That's a case I'd like to make about that. How about North America? Well, we've watched the models through the month of November here try to increase rainfall in this area. And I said, well, if the MJO is really going to go into phase 8, it could favor broader troughs of low pressure here, which, okay, I get it. That could happen. But what about these other factors? And we've had a lot of people lately, other meteorologists, trying to bring in additional things into the forecast. And every time we introduce something new, I am not seeing things constructively line up to give us a solid forecast as we go through fall and enter winter. So I don't think it's settled at all. And here's what we're thinking about. We know the Indian Ocean dipole is dominating. I've talked about that for 10, 15 days now. That is a key factor. El Nino, east-based El Nino, is it interacting? Well, Yes, but where's the subtropical jet? Should be there, should start to form right now. We've got our negative PDO, we've got the negative PMN, but a lot of warm water here, and the whole Atlantic is still looking pretty warm. We have yet to get into the time period where sea ice is going to affect the Pacific jet. So we're not yet ready to talk about that. And I talked about this yesterday, still watching for snowpack to develop in Siberia to kind of tell me how it might influence the development of the polar vortex. We're not even yet ready to talk about things going on in the north, other than there's a Scandinavian ridge building, but we talked about that earlier this week. So I still think the connection is out of the tropics, and it will be until we get into our cold season. So I want to show you this again. This was the November, December, January forecast from the European model. About the only difference between this and the National Multi-Model Ensemble was that the National Multi-Model Ensemble was not as dry in the west. And if you look at this is kind of a drought-reducing fall pattern for some big areas across the country. But some of the latest discussion that's come in about this has been about something called the quasi-biennial oscillation. I bring it up every once in a while because sometimes when it constructively works with other factors, we need to talk about it. Right now, I think it's deconstructive. Let me make a point. It's in its easterly phase. What does that mean? Well, I'm going to show you a diagram. I hope I can explain this well. But what you're doing is you're looking at a pressure of 300 millibars to 10. This is where the jet stream lives. This is in the stratosphere. And what we're looking at here is over time, when there's been westerly winds that developed and descended versus easterly winds that have developed and descended. Where are we right now? We just finished from 2022 into 2023 westerlies that have descended, and we're right now seeing easterlies that are descending. Now what I did was I went back in all these years, back to 1980, and found every time in fall we had descending easterly QBO signal. And I started to just kind of build together what those years look like. Now this is interesting. When you stitch them all together, here they are, in October to December, they had, on average, not every one of them, but when you put them all together, there was a La Nina, cold Atlantic, warm, so this is positive PMM, and positive PDO. Now how is that constructive with what we've currently got? I just showed it to you. We have the opposite of all three of these phases. So we start to say, well, what happened when there was an El Nino? We were a bit drier here in October to December, wetter, wetter, and wetter with a drier signal over the eastern Great Lakes. Now that's just El Nino. Okay, that's eastern Great Lakes and Ohio River Valley. What if we look at the QBO? Look at it. I mean, the only thing it agrees on is drier here, but wetter in this area. I mean, it's just, I cannot tell you that the QBO is the most dominant signal as we enter winter. I don't know how I could make it constructively interfere with anything going on right now. So as it stands, I'm just going to rest on, where the heck did I put it? So sorry, too many tabs. I don't know, wherever the MJO one is, sorry. There it is. This is the thing I think is most dominant right now. And until I see the MJO move or something else take over, I think what we're going to continue to see here is a whole lot of what we've just seen, because this thing is lined up and stacked up like that. So if you want to know what I'm going to go with, I'm going to go with persistence in the forecast. Persistence in the forecast, not predicting at this point, especially over the next 10 days, some sort of massive shift. All right, you've spent a lot of time with me this week. I appreciate all of you that listen, and it's great to have an outlet that I can kind of talk about what I'm watching here. I hope you find it useful and instructive. And with that, have a great weekend. We'll talk next week. Thanks.